Okay, good afternoon and welcome to everybody who is joining us this afternoon and to anybody who watches this in the recording at a later time. We know how busy it is in schools all the time, but especially during term 4 in the year of COVID. So we are grateful for you spending your time with us today. As I said, this is being recorded. So if you do want to make sure that you do not appear in the recording in any way, please feel free to leave your camera switched off. It's not mandated though. We always like seeing people's faces, but you can do that. We will use the chat a lot this afternoon as well. So you'll see the chat in the corner. Drop anything in at any point. We are going to have very deliberate pauses for questions the whole way throughout the session. But if you have any burning questions or comments or wonderings, you've got a great team of people here this afternoon that will be able to assist you. Nice segue, Rich, on controlling the slides. So on that note, I am joined by 3 of my awesome colleagues this afternoon. So my name is Kimberly Hall. I am part of the Google for Education team and I oversee Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. But I also have with me Chris Betcher, who is the Program Manager for Adoption, waving now, across Australia and New Zealand. Steve Smith, drinking a cup of tea, who is the New Zealand Education Lead. And Richard Johnson, who is our Education Solution Engineer. And I had to read your title, honestly, Rich, off the slide because I just make it up every time. But basically, Rich is our guru of all things technical and G Suite. So between the 4 of us, our intention is to be able to support you as much as possible. And we will have some contact details at the end of this afternoon as well. I'll read through the overview. This is what we're going to do this afternoon. So and I'm going to hand over to you, Steve. So we're going to do a bit of a, what is Chrome OS, how to deploy them, some key policies and features. We're hoping to call out some of our hero features within managing Chrome OS. Look at a little bit of the security, talk briefly about some of the accessibility, some support options, how you can stay up to date with Chrome, because like all things Google, we launch early and iterate with all of our products, so you know that innovation and iteration is built into anything that you ever use that is a Google product. And we also have a voice of a school who has very kindly agreed to talk at the end from one of our Google reference schools. Josh is going to talk a little bit about Murray Bridge High School's journey with Chromebooks over the last few years. They are doing some pretty awesome things there, so looking forward to hearing from him. Okay, so as I said, please use the chat at any point. This is very much able to be a discussion. We have a nice small group live with us, and so it enables you to deep dive into anything. So Steve, I'm handballing across the ditch to you.
Oh, nice one, thanks. Nice segue. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to this bit. So I'm Steve, I'm from New Zealand. I'm looking after education in New Zealand for Google amongst the wider team who looks after, we kind of look after Australia, New Zealand, and some of us are dabbling across into Asia Pacific as well. So what the aim is today is to have a talk through managing Chromebooks and why you'd manage a Chromebook as opposed to just the bring your own device, or sometimes known as a bring your own disaster, depending on how well it's going. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at a couple of reasons why we recommend that you should manage your Chromebook. So we all know that teachers are time poor and resource lean. You know, we've all obviously been in schools, or you guys are out in the schools at the moment. So we know that the pressure on you guys to look after your classrooms is super high. And how can we look to change this for you? Right, let's go next one. Is Rich driving? Look at that, fantastic. So for IT admins, same deal as the teachers. You know, you are overstretched, under-resourced, time is critical. And as we all know from working with IT admins, often big problems hit you real fast and you need to be able to sort them out really, really quickly. So we've seen a 103% increase in cybersecurity breaches since 2017. 70 to 1 there, it says the recommended ratio of end users to IT staff. So if you think about your place of work, that might be a slightly different number. I know back in my last school, it was closer to about 1,200 to 1. So that number is, I think, a ballpark that we could all aspire to, but perhaps not. Let's jump to the next one, Rich. So where does a Chromebook fit into all of this, you may ask? So they are obviously a shareable device, and they are specifically designed for the classroom. Now, the big thing about a Chromebook is it was designed for the classroom. It wasn't taken from another context and tried to kind of mash into a classroom context and let's see how this works. It was designed for the classroom. It was designed to work with the G Suite of apps that you all know and love. Boot up very, very quickly. The battery lasts all day, which is obviously when schools are looking for IT and ICT solutions. Those are two really, really important things. All right, let's go next. So shareable and collaborative, as we talked about. So down the bottom, the Chromebook and G Suite plus the admin console leads to the sort of perfect place in a school. Thanks, Rich. So we know about our world-renowned education suite, #1 device, selling device in US, Canada, Sweden, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. 120 million students and teachers are using G Suite for education. 40 million using Chromebook, and about 100 million using Google Classroom. Obviously, those numbers have risen in the last 6 months. All right, let's go next. So thinking about Chrome management. Chrome management is what we use to manage all our Chrome devices, be it Chrome tablets, Chromebooks, or the Chrome boxes that sit on desktops. So the ability to deploy your devices really, really quickly, to update them really, really quickly in the background without touching them. We can look at 3 points here: managing devices easily, the 24/7 support, and the customizable policies, which we'll have a look at. And these are some things that we think are really, really important. There is a whole lot of information on here. We will gloss over some of it. And if you want to go back and have a look at it, you certainly can. So what we're talking about is the Chrome Education Upgrade, or known as the Chrome license or the Chrome Management license. There are lots of different names for it, but basically it's a license that is purchased, put onto your domain, that allows you to manage those Chrome devices. So just go back, Rich, just for one little bit there. Really important bit down the bottom. It is a one-time purchase that lasts on your domain for the lifetime of that device. Okay, so it lives on your domain, at your school domain. Okay, let's go next one. So if we think about what about if devices aren't managed with the Chrome Education Upgrade or the Chrome Education License? So students can use guest mode or sign in with any account they want. There won't be user settings applied if they're signing in with guest mode. School networks can be less secure. For example, if a student brings their own device to school, they could be doing anything in the background. They could be browsing Netflix, downloading Netflix. They could be on GitHub downloading all sorts of things. They could be chatting on 4chan, which apparently the kids love to do nowadays. So it's about the idea that they are not a secure device, and if they're not secure, they're not appropriate for learning. Lost or stolen devices can be used by anybody. There is a huge amount of time and effort that's required to manage individual devices rather than managing them all at once. And of course, the setup times of a Chromebook are vastly quicker than other devices. So if you're deploying them out of the box, you're managing them out of the box, they are incredibly quick to set up, as seen by many departments of education across New Zealand and Australia who have been setting them up really quickly through COVID. All right, let's jump to the next one. So let's have a look at enrollment really, really quickly. So enrollment, what we do is we log into the admin console, set up your device with those 3 buttons on there, the Control Alt and E. It will enroll it into your domain. What it does then is it picks up a license. So a really key point here is to make sure you've got some licenses or some Chrome Education upgrades sitting on your domain before you do this process. Once you've done that, you will be managing your device. Jump forward, Rich. So device enrollment, we're putting a username and password, adding the asset ID. Now the asset ID will allow you to track that device as well. If it is something that you're going to roll out in a couple of years, you can choose that device and roll it out. So having an asset ID, as most of you would on your assets anyway, is really important in the enrollment process. Right, let's go forward. So you can choose what's called an OU, or an organizational unit. Now, an organizational unit is an area of your domain where that device lives. And if you put students in one unit, teachers in another, you can manage how each of them works differently. So thinking about the enrollment process here, really simple little flowchart. You either have a previously used device, which you'll power wash, or a new device. You enroll them, and once they're enrolled, you can configure those device policies and configure the user policies. All right, let's jump forward next, Rich. So thinking about policies and structures, Rich can take over from here. Actually, before we jump forward, Rich, has anybody got any questions on that first little bit? I realize I kind of raced through that really quickly. Is there anything anybody wants to flag before we jump forward to the next section?
One thing I did wonder, Steve, when you were talking, I know the answer to it, but I did wonder if I was new. I know that if some people are at very different stages of their Chromebook journey who have joined us, either live or in the recording, was you talked about this concept of making sure that you had some licenses or Chrome education upgrades in the domain before you enrolled it.
Yep.
Are you guys going to tell us how do I do that? How do I make sure I have some?
Yeah, sure. Great question, Kibbley. So you'll all be working with a partner who looks after your IT support at your school. They can order those licenses for you. So if you know you've got 50 new Chromebooks coming in, then what you'd say to your partner is, look, can you order us 50 licenses? They will order them. They'll be provisioned into your domain. So they'll be sitting inside your domain. On your admin console, you can see how many licenses you have sitting there. So you may actually have some sitting in there already. So a bit of homework for everyone is they could go shoot home, have a look at your admin console and see if you can find any see if you find any of those licenses sitting in there, either through the devices section or the billing section. Okay, awesome. So you talk to your partner, they'll be able to order some for you.
And most of our Chromebooks across Australia, most of the resellers that we work with in Australia, and I it's a little bit different in New Zealand, but they will encourage you to bundle the Chrome education upgrade in your purchase for Chromebooks. So rather than it being an afterthought, and as Steve said, they will manage you need to let them know what domain it's going to be registered to, and that'll all just be part of the standard transaction as well.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense to get it all at once, so you know how many you need to order.
Yeah. All right.
Rich.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. Rich Johnson here, Solution Engineer for your region. We're going to have a look at a few key policies today around how do you set up your education tenant and also the OU structure in which you apply these policies. So first, I want to talk about organizational units and what they are. So organizational units are almost like buckets that you put different users into, and you can segregate users based on what they mean. So if they are a student, then they can go in a student bucket. If they're a year one student, then they can go in their sub bucket, and so on and so forth. I think you understand how the structure works, but the reason that we have this is because all policies for Chrome devices are applied based on an OU structure. So you can see on the screen today, this is an example of what an OU structure looks like. Key thing to call out here is you can set up the structure any way you like. However, we do recommend that you do separate any BYOD devices from school-owned devices. And that's key because you're going to have different policies applied to that. When we like to talk about our settings and our policies that we have in our domain, we split them into two different groups. One of them is device settings. So device settings are settings that follow the device regardless of who's logged onto it. And the second one is user settings. So these are settings that apply to your browser, and they follow the user regardless of where they're logged into. Whether they're logged into a device at school or whether they're logged into a device at home, these policies, these applications, these extensions, all of that will follow the user through their experience. So I'm going to go and talk about the device settings. Again, just a reminder, these are settings that follow the device regardless of who's using them. So first off, one of the key things to apply as an administrator is you need to specify who can log in to your set of devices. Now, if you share these devices across different tenants or different schools, you might want to list different domains in there so that people can access them from different locations. However, in most cases with most schools, you probably just have one domain, which you just need to list there so that students can't sign in with their Gmail account or parents can't sign in with a separate Gmail account as well. It's just another security level for you. Also to disable guest mode. So guest mode is something that comes as part of a retail experience or a consumer experience, and you can disable that so that no one else can use the device if they get a hold of it and they're outside of the school. Autocomplete domain is a cool feature to have. We brought it in especially for kindergarten year 1 students that couldn't type a huge amount of characters. They were limited to just their username. And so we pre-fill that domain name for them. It just makes it a little bit easier. Also helps you understand where that device is enrolled to. We have a new feature called off-hours sign-in, and we've been running this for a little bit. And it's designed to give flexibility for those that choose a BYOD option. And what this means is that you're able to turn your policies on and off for an individual device based on the scheduling hours of when you're in school and when you're at home. So we do have a session next week on BYOD where we'll talk more about this. However, this feature is very, very useful if you plan to manage a huge amount of BYOD devices. And the biggest thing that we get from parents and teachers and schools is that the parents actually own the devices. And so they like to have that bit of control after hours or when the student comes home. And so that's why we implemented this feature. So it's definitely something that you're worth looking at and setting that up for your domain. Again, make sure you apply it to a separate OU bucket where your BYOD devices are located in. Now, one of our security metrics is obviously to ensure that any device that gets disabled, and this is not a new concept, has return instructions, okay? It's very important that you set this up. Most administrators don't think about this until your first device is actually lost, and then they go to disable it, and they wonder how are they actually going to get this device back. It's better than putting a label on the device. All you need to do, open up the device, your screen will be red with white writing, and it will have the message that you have on there. So please, please, please set that up.
So Rich, that one is really handy in keeping your school-owned assets super safe. So if they do get lost, they're pretty much useless, aren't they?
Correct, yes. Essentially, we can brick the device just by disabling it.
Yeah, so that happens once it's managed, but if it was just a bring your own disaster, if it's lost, right?
That's correct, yes. Okay, so single app kiosk. While that sounds a little bit complicated, it's actually just launching a Chrome web app straight out of the box. This means that when a student opens up their device, it launches straight into this app, and it means that they can't go anywhere else. Now, this is extremely useful for any online testing. So for those that are Australia-based, things such as the NAPLAN test is actually linked into your Chrome admin console, and that means that if someone opens up their device, they can automatically launch this app without having to log in. It's actually the quickest way to get into the NAPLAN application and the quickest way to get into any kiosk application that you'd like to run. Now, public sessions is probably something that not a lot of people have heard about, and not a lot of schools consider it.
And also, apparently, Rich doesn't want to talk about. It's quite a dramatic exit.
Even less people hearing about it now.
I know, that's exactly it. We'll just give him, well, he's going to keep talking, isn't he, Steve? So we'll give him half a second to rejoin and share. And if not, we might have to get you to start sharing. You are muted. Maybe we'll just pause for a moment and see if there, while Rich comes back on, we were going to have a little questions moment afterwards. Any questions, comments, wonderings, ponderings, thoughts? Josh, that includes you, because I know that you've been doing this for a long time. So if there's anything, that Rich has talked about so far that you have found particularly useful or want to call out, where your voice is very valued here.
I think one of the big things that that Richard was talking about was that idea of you can have device settings and you can have user settings. And if people aren't aware of the difference between those, so a user setting is where if I log into a browser, so I log into my Chrome browser picks up the settings that my school has set up for me. But the Chromebook itself won't pick up settings unless it is managed. So people say, hey, look, how can we block a certain URL? How can we stop people going here? Well, unless you have a third-party piece of software available, you do that by managing the Chromebook. So there's a whole lot of things you can do to the Chromebook when it's managed with that Chrome Education Upgrade license. So that's the difference between a device setting and a user setting. The user settings will come down to Chrome. Everyone in Chrome gets it. Then once you have that device setting, the device setting is the one you'll get when it's managed.
And I think, Steve, that's an important differentiation as well, just thinking about, like, we often, when we talk about things like the Chrome Education Upgrade, go straight to like being able to stop kids doing things and like security and privacy and stuff like that. But just thinking about, as a teacher, being able to make sure that all my devices all have certain things happening on them so that, the kids in certain year levels have a particular experience and they have access to the things that I want them to when they open their device, can make the whole process of learning seamless, as opposed to spending all that time actually having to, say, okay, now kids, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, actually having that, I think can be really powerful. So from a really positive spin on it.
Exactly right.
I can tell you of at least 2 Chromebooks that went missing at the school I was at that got returned because when people, we assume, stole them, and they got them home and realised they actually couldn't do anything with them unless they had a school account because they were all completely locked to the domain and no guest mode. So, and there was a little message on the screen saying, if this Chromebook is lost, please return to this address. And they came back. So
Perfect.
That was a win.
Perfect.
Nice. Rich, welcome back. We thought it was a dramatic exit, but we're glad that you decided to rejoin us.
Did I manage to get to this screen?
No, you were still talking about public sessions. You actually introduced public sessions and then disappeared quite dramatically.
Okay. I didn't want anyone to know about public sessions.
We actually discussed that. It was clearly a top secret. So
yes. So just to recap, public sessions for a scenario where you want minimal people to log into the device, whether that's kindergarten, year 1, year 2, or you want to have it in a session where it's in a library environment where it's easy to log into. They're just searching an intranet-based website or anything like that. So again, this is something that you can set up as part of your domain, and it needs to be applied to a separate OU to all your other devices. But it's there if you need it. Okay. We've already had the question time, so...
Yeah, we did. We had a nice old chin wag while you were gone.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so user settings. Now, if you remember from what I told you before, user settings are settings that follow the user regardless of what device they're using. So whether they're using it at school or whether they're using it at home, it's going to be the same policies and settings that follow that person. So a couple of things to go through here that are important for a school environment. First of all, incognito mode and browser history. These are usually turned off in school. Incognito mode is turned off in a school environment. Browser history is usually turned on to allow admins to track anything that they need to. Incognito mode, obviously, you all know what that is. It means that no caching is done or anything like that with the browser as soon as you click the X button. Safe browsing. So safe browsing is something that you can apply as part of a consumer environment just on your Chrome browser. However, you can actually push this setting down to all of your users and make it mandatory. So it's something that we ask to enable for schools. And what that means is that when you're searching through Google search, appropriate material is going to come up rather than any material that you see on the internet. So almost like that saying, not safe for work, that sort of thing, that applies in this scenario.
Hey, Rich, can I ask a clarifying question on that? Say I was, for some reason, and I wouldn't, be using a browser other than, like a search engine other than Google. Does safe search work? Is it only, does anyone use, is there other search engines? I realize that I'm representing Google right now, so there's a chance I'm a little bit biased, but I do believe that some people may use other search engines.
Yeah, so say using Yahoo as a search engine, don't know if that exists anymore.
I'm not sure either.
No, that safe search would not work. However, when you search in your URL bar or your top bar, it will apply it to any Google pages that come up as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Definitely nobody wants to do any searching in anything other than Google, but I just thought I would clarify.
Always good to clarify. I don't know any other search engines. So home pages and pages to load on startup, this is very useful for a school environment, especially if you have a landing page or an intranet or quick links to different resources. Always good to have your home page set up. And then also any pages to load on startup. We find this great for younger years so that they don't have to type in drive.google.com or go to different icons. It's just there ready to go as soon as they open the lid of their device. Safe search and YouTube restricted mode. So we talked about safe search before. There's also a restricted mode for YouTube. And there's different levels of restrictions that you can put on YouTube to make sure that content is appropriate, but also to disable things such as uploading any videos. So you might be able to consume videos at a certain point, but not upload them yourself. So it's just a safety recommendation that we ask all admins to consider when setting up their domain. Now, URL blocking is an interesting one. So we've put the URL blocking capabilities in the admin console, and this is great for stopping access to known sites. However, it's not the end all and be all of filtering. I like to use it as a temporary solution so that while you're waiting for your proxy filter service to kick in, you can put websites in here. So an example of this is you're teaching a class and then all of a sudden someone's showing you a funny site that they shouldn't be on. Go in here, put it in the URL blocking, go and talk to your proxy provider and tell them about the website. And they'll push it through your network. As you can imagine, that takes time to propagate, and this is where this comes in really handy.
Another great use of that that I've seen over the last little bit is people who are using old Meet links. So students were using Meet links that don't expire. You can chuck them in here as well. It'll block students from going back into an old Meet that you may not have set up through Classroom.
Absolutely, great use case there. Printing. So this is a very, very interesting topic. We used to have a service called Google Cloud Print. That is now being what we call deprecated, and we are moving on to new types of printing. So we've put a lot of printing features into the console, native printing features, so cups printing. But we've also partnered with other cloud printing providers as well if you wish to continue on using cloud print services. So people like Papercut or Ricoh, Follow Me Print, those sort of services still exist today, and you can still use them in conjunction with your devices. And we'll move on. Managed bookmarks, obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory. These are bookmarks that you can push out to devices. Very great especially for the younger years. And any educational resources that you need students and staff to look up very, very quickly. Now, with Chromebooks, we put very limited storage on the devices. Usually it's around a minimum of about 32 gigs or so. What we do suggest is that when you set a download location for the Chrome browser on those devices, you can either set it to the local drive or you can set it to go to Google Drive. Now, we do ask that it goes to Google Drive, even though by default it goes to the local one. And the reason for that is if you do wipe the device, it will wipe your local drive as well. So any downloads will go into your Google Drive. That means you don't have anyone coming back, whether that's students or staff, and saying, I've lost all of my stuff because they've decided to go and wipe their device themselves.
And Rich, just a point of clarification on that as well. It doesn't have to be a Google file to go into Google Drive. So you can actually upload, I believe, any file type in the entire world into Drive.
Yeah, I'll put a little asterisk next to it, but yes, any file type. Yep.
I can name about 4 file types. So anyone that I know of, you could upload into Google Drive. So it is something that, it does give you that extra. You may not be able to, manipulate it within Drive, but you will always have access to the original file.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Disabling hardware. So schools have a lot of different policies around what they can and can't use in the classroom. Key ones are using USB drives to bring content to school. In this day and age, you shouldn't really be using USB drives in a workplace or a school environment. There's no need. That's why we have Google Drive. And you have the option to stop those or block those. Again, anything to do with audio input, output, or video, that can be a distraction in a classroom. And if your school policies tell you to block these, then you have the ability to do that via the console. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second.
We do have a question that's come in, Rich.
Great.
Chris, you want to?
Yeah, sure. Raul Anderson's asked, is safe mode restricted YouTube filters applicable to each OU rather than to top level? The answer is absolutely yes. All of these settings that Rich and Steve were talking about there, they're all applicable on an OU basis. And that's why, if you go back to what Steve said in the beginning, why it's so important to get that organizational structure set up in the right way for your particular school setting. And there's really no absolute right and wrong way to do it. There's a couple of best practice guides we can talk to you about. Keep your students separate to your staff and so on. But, you know, how you go from there might vary based on your school. But the important thing is any of these settings you're looking at can be turned on or off for individual OUs. So you could have like a restriction on turning your webcam on for year 1, but not year 2, or you could enable access to, you know, Google Drive storage for year 6, but not year 5, and so on and so on. So it's very granular. You've got total control over how all of this operates for any user.
And a fun fact, isn't there like 1 billion OUs that you can have? Rich, I just made that number
I
up.
don't know what the number is.
To be exact, 45,000.
Okay, so probably unlikely that many schools are going to need more than 45,000 OUs, but it does mean, to Chris's point, that you can be, you know, quite granular if you wanted to be around the way that you actually organise your OUs.
Yeah. If you reach 45,000, please send us a message so we can congratulate you on hitting the maximum.
Michelle Sharma's asked a question there about when the download location is Google Drive, does it keep a copy on the local hard disk? I don't believe it does. I believe the file just goes to wherever you tell it to go, and it treats Google Drive just the same as it would treat a conventional disk, except it's just in the cloud. And I know Rich said that, you know, minimum entry level storage for a Chromebook is typically around 32 gig. You probably find these days most Chromebooks is at least 64. 32 is very minimal. 64, and it's becoming more and more common to have 128 of local storage. But the thing is, you know, you got to remember that local storage is on the device, and part of the beauty of a Chromebook is that if I have a Chromebook and I'm on the way home from school and it falls out of the bus and gets run over or something, all I need to go is get another Chromebook and sign into it, and all my stuff is there. If you've got stuff stored on the local storage, then obviously that died with the old Chromebook. It's only the stuff that you're putting in the cloud that's sort of safe. So just something to bear in mind. The best practice is to put everything in the cloud storage rather than the local storage.
And Josh, I can see that you've unmuted.
Yeah, I have. Yes, all of those policies, you know, we're using most of those, and you know, they're really great, like Rich has said, and it's brilliant. But I must admit, you know, a couple of those, you know, I wasn't too aware about, particularly like the off hours sign-in restrictions. You know, that being a relatively new one, you indicated. So I guess my question is, what's the best way to keep in the loop for when new policies like that are added? You know, where do we go to find that, or, you know, subscribe to get that information?
Yeah, so there's a Google Chrome blog post that brings all of the latest updates with each version that comes along. There's 3 channels of Chrome updates, stable, dev, and beta. So you can keep up to date. We'll give you a link right at the end. We actually talk about that at the end of the presentation. So, and we'll send that out.
Cool, awesome.
We have one more question that's come in as well, Rich, before you continue, from Dane. So what is the advantage of using restricted mode for YouTube through user and browser settings rather than through app settings?
So app settings, you're enabling it individually for each user. When you're using restricted mode through the user and browser settings, you're applying it across an OU or across an entire domain. Just to confirm, when you say app settings, you're talking about the individual YouTube app that you're setting it on.
Well, I would add to that, Richard, because that actually makes me curious. What about when you set it in the other Google services section of the admin console?
I'm just looking at the response. Yes. Yep. So that's so they both apply. They both do the same thing. Yep. So whether you set it in the user and browser section or additional apps, it has the same levels of restrictions that you apply.
Yeah, and that setting is one of those ones that is super important for schools who don't like their kids to upload videos of themselves when they're at school. so it helps to keep your school safe and keep your network safe and keep your kids safe at school. So it's part of looking after them, which is part of the benefits of managing those Chromebooks.
And just to let you know, you can also apply these settings at a network level. So while these will all apply to Chromebooks, if you have mobile phones or other devices that are on your network and you want to apply these settings, you can, and you apply it at what we call a DNS level. Okay. Let's move on because I know that we are running out of time. I'm going to talk about apps and extensions here. So on a Chrome device, there are multiple types of apps and extensions. We've got Android apps, we've got Chrome apps, we've got Linux apps, and we've also got a new thing called PWA. So I'm going to go through and tell you what you can and can't do with those applications. So the first thing is with all Chrome and Android apps, you'll be able to allow or block some of those apps. And you can control that through, there's a whole app section within the admin console that you can do that. So again, you can allow list or deny list in there. You can force install the applications and extensions, so you can ensure that each user will get them and it will run when they open their device. You can also block extensions by permission. Now, this is really important. The reason for this is that a lot of customers come to me and they say, which apps should we allow, which apps shouldn't we allow? And my response is, well, you should look at the permissions. You should see what are the apps actually asking for from the individual users. And that's what you should be concentrating on. And if it's asking for individual details, or if it's asking for access to their photos or anything like that, then that may be something that you deny. Definitely worth going through this permission list. So that's found in the application settings.
Hey, Rich, can you just go back to that slide for 1 sec? I just want to point something out, just going back to the question that Raul asked before. You can see those settings there for turning things on and off and the permissions. If you look to the left of that, you'll see staff and students on the left. You can see students is highlighted in blue. So these settings in this screenshot here are things that are being applied just to students. It would be a completely different set of settings if you wanted to be applied to staff. So I just wanted to point out how that worked.
Yep. The number one extension that students try to install is a VPN provider, trying to circumvent the network. So definitely one that you should tick. Okay, pinned apps and extensions. So I mentioned that you can force install and everything like that, but you can actually pin them to the taskbar that you see on Chrome OS, as well as the browser if you need to do that. Now, Chrome web apps. This is an interesting one. So we've had Chrome web apps for a number of years now. They are slowly going away and they will be replaced with what we call PWAs. So these progressive web applications are applications that are available across multiple platforms, and hence the new way that we are looking at producing apps on all devices. As these come through, you'll be able to apply them in exactly the same way that the Chrome Web Store apps were able to be applied before. You'll have them listed not only on the vendor's website where you can install them, but they'll also be as part of the Play Store as well that you can search through a catalog. And again, Android applications on Chrome devices, it's a two-step process here to enable them. First one is you need to enable it for the OU to allow that the Play Store can open up on a device. And the second part is you need to actually select the applications to push down. So this is an allow list process. It means that you can't supply the entire catalog to an end user. It means you have to select the applications for them and then push them down and give them the choice of installing them, or you can force install them on the device. Okay, I'll stop there for a couple of seconds if anyone's got any questions.
I was just going to put Josh on the spot and just ask you, as you take your drink, sorry. Yeah, like I know I'm aware of what Murray Bridge High School's done with that when it comes to things like apps. Do you want to just share like how you guys went about making the decision, what you currently do in terms of the stuff that Rich talked about for managing them and why?
Yeah, so we started out leaving it open. We didn't want to lock it down too much so that students would find a reason not to want to use the device that we were providing. We did find over time, they were trying to get the VPN apps and things like that, but also they'll just find other random extensions that would just make the browser crash and just cause issues. So what we've done is we've now moved to a whitelist, an allow list model for the students, where, you know, and we're allowing students to say, hey, you know, I want this, and we'll just vet it and make sure it's okay and relevant, and we'll add it to the web store collection, and they can see it in our domain collection, and, you know, install it if they want, or just leave it. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. And I think that, you know, something that I've definitely come across with users across the board is that there's definitely a misconception that because you're on a Chromebook signed in with a Google account, that any apps that you might be able to find are Google apps. And then, you know, consequently, because we know Google obviously has, you know, all of its I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of security and privacy, that by default, those apps inherit that. And that's not the case. The vast majority of them are third-party apps that, you know, just like any web store, any app store that you find on your phone or any device. And I think that's a really important thing to have a discussion about at a school level, about how you want to manage that, and considerations in light of that.
Yeah, I think it's worth just mentioning too, we have a large client that asked us to review some of their settings about the apps that they had installed across their network. And I think we identified something about 16 or 17,000 different Chrome and like Chrome apps that students had installed. But when we filtered those down to say, let's take out all the ones that had anything to do with gaming, let's take out the ones that had anything to do with you know, fancy screensavers or whatever, we whittled it down to literally a couple of hundred actual useful, legitimate apps. So if you have an open policy and just let students do anything, they will install all sorts of rubbish there. And so that's why it's a much better policy to say, turn that on, so you then give an approved list to students, say, these are the things that we trust and we know work, and these are the ones you can have a choice of.
Awesome. Thanks, Dane.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll just add in real quick. Probably the other benefit that we've got from vetting it is, you know, due to our organisational policies, we need to check things like privacy policies, terms of service, that sort of thing. Obviously, having that allow list model that allows us to do that, obviously to make sure the students, you know, are still safe, their data and information, whatnot's not being misused, all that sort of thing. Whereas, you know, like you're saying, you know, leaving it open, anything and everything can happen. So, you know, that's, you know, a consideration as well.
And again, that's administrable on an OU basis. So you can put restrictions on for students and not for staff, or whatever combination you like. You've got that flexibility.
Great.
Cool. All right, let's go next slide. But thanks, Rich.
All right. So with your admin console, you can also manage your devices from an asset point of view. One of the key things is to understand is that when you enroll a device, it will actually go into your admin console, and it will list all sorts of attributes within there. So serial number, status, asset ID, and enrollment, which Steve talked about before. But it also gives you some key information, such as who's actually using the device, the location that you put in there as well. There are add-ons, so you can get things such as Chromebook Getter, which allows you to bulk consume all this information into a spreadsheet and upload it as well back into the console if you need to edit information en masse. So again, if you click on any of those individual devices within the console, you'll see a whole heap of information from system activity, but also who's been using the device and the most recent users that are in there. So good to know stuff, especially if you're doing any troubleshooting as an administrator. I mentioned about the disable message. From the device asset point of view, this is where you go in and you select which device you want to disable. Again, here's an example of the screenshot that will come up once it's disabled. We've tested this across a number of devices, and I've mass disabled a whole heap, and it usually happens within at least 10 to 20 seconds. So it's reasonably quick. Now, deprovisioning a device is a very interesting scenario, and the reason for that is it can occur at any point throughout the life of the device. A couple of reasons you'd want to do this: if a student is leaving your school and they need to take their device with them, or it's a BYOD device, if you have an old asset that you want to retire from the fleet, or if there's a fault with the device and you need to replace it with another one. If you need to replace your device with another one due to a fault, the license is transferable in terms you can bring it back into your domain, and apply it to another device. For any other scenario, the license does not come back into the domain. It stays with the device. So how to wipe a device? Now, I know this sounds like a very simple concept, but if you think about it in terms of other providers out there on different OSs, it's a very long process just to wipe a device and bring it back up. To do this on a Chrome device, it literally takes around about 30 to 40 seconds. And it's very simple. Escape, refresh, power. There's a screen that comes up. You hit Control-D, spacebar, enter, and you are back to a clean slate. It is very, very quick. And that's why we built these devices. We built them so that they are quick to refresh, they're quick and easy to use, and they're very good, especially in a scenario where you need to just wipe them and start again.
So, Rich, if you were using a Chromebook and for any reason it wasn't going great, I know, I've used other computers before, and re-imaging and taking 3 or 4 hours to rebuild. So, if you've got a Chromebook, is it basically just power wash and it's ready to go again?
Absolutely. So the old IT saying of just restart the device or just power wash and factory reset it will fix it. Absolutely in this case. And there's a very good reason behind it, because there are 2 operating systems that run on Chrome OS. There's a primary and a secondary. And whenever updates or any changes are made to the operating system on the primary, the secondary stays on a stable version behind the scene, just in case that primary version gets corrupt or anything else that happens to it. If that happens, the secondary will boot up instead, and it will fix the primary in the background. So it's a very, very stable and secure device.
Perfect.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna not pause for any questions here. Troubleshooting and updating. So again, Steve just talked about power washing the device. That's an alternative to restarting and wiping it clean, just like I showed you before. And support tools. Sorry?
Format C:.
I don't know what that means, Chris.
Yes. That's from another operating system, if anyone didn't get that. Sure. Requesting support. So we have 24/7 support with any of our Google products that you have here. You have 3 options when you ask for support. You can do it over a phone, you can do it over instant message, or you can send off an email. These are available from within the admin console. You just need to find the little support icon on the main page, and you'll be asked to select which option you want support for, whether that's Chrome OS or whether that's G Suite. If you want any further help, or you're looking at known issues or trying to troubleshoot and fix things yourselves, there's a huge amount of knowledge bases out there. Our primary one is obviously the Chrome Help Center. You can go to our support site. There's heaps of information there. We also have a known issues tracker, as well as access to the release blog, which I was talking about in reference to Josh's question before. Definitely worth having a look at those, signing up to the RSS feed if you need to receive all of those automatically, but please have a look at those. Okay, I am going to hand over to Kimberly.
All right, awesome. Well, we were just going to quickly mention that one of the things that is, important to consider whenever we're thinking about a device with our students is the ability to ensure that it is an inclusive device, so that everybody is able to access and learn seamlessly. And one of the things with Chromebooks is that accessibility is built into the way that we design Chromebooks, but you actually can do with the Chrome Education upgrade. So if you're managing your Chromebooks, you can actually get quite granular on ensuring that students that need particular supports, or which is most of us, by the way, I use a lot of accessibility functions every single day, that it actually can be pushed out to them so that they don't have to go through the process of setting it up for themselves. And I'll link the links, or we're going to share the deck as well, but I'll put the links in the chat if you want to read some more on that. But I do know, as a nice segue to our final little section, that Josh, I know you're regretting giving me a picture right now, aren't you? That Murray Bridge are actually doing some of that as well in terms of pushing out certain accessibility features and making sure that the accessibility menu is pinned in their tray so that teachers can access it. But Chris, do you want to introduce Josh briefly?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, Josh Strauss from Murray Bridge High School down in South Australia. What, about an hour out of Adelaide, I believe, Josh, right?
Yeah, that's right, about an hour.
And, you know, I think the biggest high school in the region down there, or one of the biggest high schools in the region. And,
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah,
also
in our area, yeah.
reference school, which is we occasionally find schools that are doing exceptional things using Google for Education, and Murray Bridge is one of those schools. So, Josh, when did you guys start using Chromebooks?
We started really using them probably start of last year. So it's probably only about 2 years now. Before that, we were just sort of looking and exploring a little bit for an option that would suit, and you know, something that would work with us. And we landed on Chromebooks and are very happy.
Excellent. You've got, I think it's about 800 students at the school-ish?
950-ish.
And how many Chromebooks floating around there now?
We've got, I reckon, around 600, with another couple of hundred coming on board January.
So what has been, like, in terms of, I mean, you're on the, obviously, part of the team that helps manage those. What's been the biggest surprise for you in terms of managing Chromebooks with that Chrome Education Upgrade license?
Honestly, coming from, you know, the background where everything was Microsoft, just, and, you know, things would take longer. You know, it'd be a bit of a convoluted process at times, and it will just vary so wildly depending on what you're trying to do. Just the ease of doing it. It's just easy. It's point and click, and you're done. It really can't be much harder than that.
Yeah, we kind of make the claim, and I saw it in one of our slides back there, that whether you're managing 100 devices or 100,000 devices, it's kind of the same amount of work. Has that been your experience?
Pretty much so. It really is just easy, because you have an issue, you just go through the process that Richard shared of power washing it, and you start fresh again, and everything gets pushed down from the cloud. It's that easy. You don't need to worry about drivers or any rubbish like that. It's just point and click. It just works.
Yeah, good to hear. Good to hear. How many? I had a question there for you. But it's completely gone out of my head. That happens sometimes. No, that's great to hear. I mean, I love hearing these success stories, because I also worked in a school with Chromebooks, and I can relate totally to what you're saying there, how simple it is to manage all this stuff, and what a nightmare it used to be doing it the older way that I used to have to do it. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff.
Josh, is there anything else that for you, you know, you obviously you've sat in on this, and you guys are doing an impressive job of the way that you manage everything over there. Any other sort of key wins, takeaway messages that you would think it's worth sharing with everyone?
Yeah, I did try and make a little bit of a dot point list in case I needed ideas from after you emailed me yesterday. I've been racking my brain trying to think of things that might be worth sharing. And I must say most of it's been covered already, which is good. I can't emphasize enough, though, that access to the Google support, you know, just makes things so much easier. You know, we might be on top of things, but occasionally we'll come across something we don't know, or something might just be a bit weird and we want some clarification. And that access to support is invaluable. So that's, you know, I can't understate that enough. Probably the other thing that's been really good is just the fact that we can just easily set those settings. So, you know, some settings that weren't covered was like the network settings. It's easy. Other platforms, varying degrees of easy and not quite as easy. But, you know, it really just makes things efficient, so you've got more time to do other things. It's really what everything boils down to for the most part. You know, like setting up the NAPLAN app. We were going to use it this year, didn't happen, but, you know, we set it up, had it all in place. It was just, you know, easy, quick. Probably the one thing, though, that, and this is probably a little bit more technical, but the thing that's really easy, or that's been good, is when we log in, we use a third-party SSO provider, which is our on-site ADFS. We've got the option to keep that login session cookie, and so that then when users access other websites that are use that same ADFS, it just goes through as a true single sign-on. And it's just that ease of use just really makes things simple. Because if it's simple, users can't mess it up. So, just all round, it just makes things easy, which means that we've got more time to do other things.
How many people on this IT staff down there does it take to manage those 600 devices?
There's 3 of us, but although we've got about 600 devices, we've still got other legacy devices, other networks and things. So and that's where a great deal of our time goes. All up, we probably spend it's probably less than a full-time load at this point for a single person. Because it's pretty much set and forget. If you have an issue, we spend more time fixing the Chromebooks that the students break than dealing with managing them.
Good point. Thanks for sharing.
That's all right.
I'll hand back over to Kimberly.
All right, we are at the end of our time, and we wanted to make sure that we, have a few moments if anyone wants to ask any additional questions, but also just if you want a point of contact. We have the 3 email addresses on the screen that, depending on which region you're in, and if you don't fall into any of those particular places listed, you can feel free to reach out to me and I can direct you to the right person. But we're happy to chat more or, point you in the right direction. Ultimately, we're very fortunate at Google that we work with an amazing network of partners who are the ones who, manage the relationships with schools and help you guys to be set up for success with your device choices. So if you are not already working with a partner and you'd like to chat about how that might enhance that whole process for you as well, please feel free to send me an email or Brent if you're in New South Wales, ACT or WA, or Steve across the ditch. And we can definitely point you in the right direction because, we are very fortunate to have a great network around us supporting these tools and supporting schools in not only purchasing but maximising the use of them as well. All right. If there are no additional questions, please feel free to drop off at any point. Once again, we are really grateful for you spending some time with us this afternoon. We will be back on Tuesday talking specifically about BYOD devices and why you would manage them. It is a question that, Rich alluded to, and I think Steve did as well this afternoon, that there is definitely some debate around managing BYOD, sometimes from the community who may have supplied those devices. So we want to talk through some of the settings and processes and why, from a school's governance point of view, it's a really important thing to consider building into your BYOD programs as well. And then the following week, we're kicking off taking a bit more of a teaching and learning focus for the last 2 sessions. So if you haven't registered for those and would like to, we'll drop the link in the chat. And please feel free to share that with anyone. And just finally, we will link the recording and a version of the deck to the calendar invitation. So check back there tomorrow and you should hopefully see them then. Steve, Chris, Rich, any final thoughts?
No, I think the big thing is, managing a device makes it a legitimate learning device. And I think that's the big thing about management with the Chrome education upgraders. It actually turns that really great device into a really learning focused device and maximizes its potential.
Yep, totally agree. I can only speak from my personal experience with it, and Chromebook without a Chrome education upgrade you just wouldn't do it. Like, it's just makes so much more sense to manage them properly.
All right. Well, I might end the recording. Please feel free to stay around, unmute, ask anything if you wish, or otherwise have a wonderful evening, everyone. And once again, thank you for choosing to spend some time with us today. We always appreciate everybody's input and prioritizing learning. So I will stop the recording now.